Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel. And this evening you find me in a hot, humid and quite stormy Miami Opelika in Florida with the brand new PMDG 737-700 for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. So this was finally released last week. PMDG is the excellent developer of add-ons that creates ultra-realistic aircraft to fly. And once you've flown PMDG or Flight Sim Labs or other add-ons which are developed by these ultra-realistic developers, there really is no going back. Now, this is the first, so these are generally referred to as study level add-ons, and this is the first study level add-on for Flight Sim 2020, certainly in my view. You know, where it's so realistically modelled. It looks fantastic, and yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to fly something like this on Flight Sim 2020 at last. These things do take a long time for developers to bring to the market, but now it's here, and I've been enjoying it so far over the last few days. I only got it at the weekend. However, it is worth saying that it's been some time since I flew the 737. So go back about 10 years or so, and I was always flying the 737. In fact, the PMDG 737 NGX for Flight Sim X at the time was the only add-on aircraft that I had for a good while, so I was always flying the 737. But nowadays, not so much. I've hardly flown the 737 in 7 or 8 years, and when they're this complicated, it takes a while to get back to grips with it and figure out how to fly it again. So that's what I've been doing the last few days, and that's what I'm also going to be doing in this live stream. We're not flying any particular distance. We're just going to do some circuits around Miami Opelika, and I'm going to talk you through how I do go-arounds. Now, go-arounds, basically they're missed approaches. It's when an approach goes wrong. It's where you need to say, okay, I'm going to go back up and try that approach again and make a safe landing. If it doesn't feel right, if you're going to need to try it out again because it's, you know, otherwise it could be a dangerous landing, you're going to do a go-around. And go-arounds obviously happen. In fact, in the live stream I did last week, do check out the video on the channel if you've not watched this. In my live stream last week, I flew my Flight Sim Labs Airbus A320 down to Washington Dulles, and I had a go-around on short final because there was another aircraft on the runway, and you've got to be prepared to do it. Now, why do I make a big thing of go-arounds? Why have I been practicing this as I've got back into the cockpit of the 737? Because go-arounds are really tricky. There's nothing quite like a go-around, in my opinion, flying an aeroplane like this, to make you realise why you need 2 people to fly this plane. So if you're doing it all on your own, if you are the only pilot, as is the case when I'm flying on Flight Sim, it makes a go-around quite tricky, and it can easily go wrong. Let's take a look at go-arounds which go wrong. If you come in, this is pre-recorded, but if you come into an airport and think, okay, I need to go around, and you just whack the throttle right up, and you haven't prepared fully for it, it can all go a bit wild. So what I tend to find happens if you're not careful is, you know, you end up very nose up, as we can see here, going up far too steeply. That compromises airspeed. You start almost risking a stall. You know, at this point, if you're on VATSIM or something, it's very likely that your controller's going to be saying, oh, turn left to such and such heading, or turn right, or go direct to such and such and climb to 2,000 feet. And you're trying to do all of that whilst just basically bring the aircraft under control. And you start fiddling around with the autopilot and just trying to say, oh right, you know, this is how I want the plane to fly. I want it to go up to 4,000 feet, and I want it to fly to this heading, and I want to fly to this speed. But the plane is a bit wild. It doesn't feel very controlled, and all in all, you know, you just want to do it a bit better than that if at all possible. So that's what a go-around when it goes wrong can look like. At this point, you know, it takes a few minutes to bring the plane under control, but also here, you know, I've selected 4,000 feet in the autopilot, but I've gone up to 5,000 feet. So it's
Miami
quite
traffic,
clear
American
I haven't really got the
1289,
plane under
clear
control. I haven't
08
approached it,
right,
but it
straight
doesn't feel
clear,
like
landing.
it's really under
Y'all have a good flight.
So that's a go around gone wrong. And what I was going to do in this live stream is walk you through how I do go arounds in the 737, and how I try and make sure that they are at all times nicely controlled, nicely stable, and I'm not going all over the place, particularly if I'm going to be flying on VATSIM. So Miami Opa Locker, let's just take a quick look at where we are just before we get the plane started up. So Miami Opa Locker is this airport here. So it's just to the north of Miami. Miami's just down here. And here is Miami Opa Locker. It's one of the executive airports serving Miami. And we can see here that the planes, well, maybe not that one, he's just taxied out, but the planes are taking off on 09 left. Perhaps I can show that a little bit more clearly if I switch over to Navigraph quickly and show you what the airport looks like here. So this is Miami Opa Locker. We are parked by that letter E there. And we're just going to taxi out on November and take off from runway 09 left. And we're also going to be doing our various approaches into 09 left as well. So pretty straightforward plan for today's flight. And what we can now do is actually get into the 737. The great thing is with PMDG add-ons is you get all of these extra bits as well. So you've got some stairs which go into the plane. No need for GSX here. This all comes with the add-on. I quite like this. This is just novelty really. And here we go. Let's get on the plane. So you can look down here. Here's our plane. We haven't got anyone on today because we're just doing some practice flying. But then we can walk through here and boom, here we are. We're in the cockpit. So that's quite a nice way to do it. So let's now jump into the left-hand seat. And the aircraft is in a cold and dark state, so everything is switched off, and we're going to start getting things turned on. So the battery goes on. Just using my Track IR headset, I'm just going to reach across to do the standby power, which needs to go over to battery, and then close. I'm also going to arm the emergency lights like that. And what we're now going to do is go down to the FMC, Flight Management Computer, and we're going to request ground power, which will mean we are plugged in to a little vehicle. There it is, so ground power is now available. That light comes on, so I'm going to turn that on. I'm also now going to turn on the APU, and this little dial here is going to start moving very shortly, which will indicate that the APU is starting up. The APU, the auxiliary power unit, that's how the plane runs under its own power. At the moment we're plugged into the ground. Once the APU is on, we will be able to run under our own power. What I'm just going to do whilst that's doing its thing is just get ourselves set up. So I'm going to say we'll just put a third of the, we'll fill up the tanks to a third full. So we've got plenty to work with today. Payload. This is just a training flight, so we're going to set the payload to be empty, which makes things nice and simple. Okay, so you can now see this needle here is active. It's just settling down. That's the exhaust gas temperature of the APU, and as that settles, I'm now going to go over here and flip the APU bleed, and I'm going to switch over to APU power, and I'm going to switch off ground power. So that means we're now running under our own steam. If I look back up here, I'm going to turn on our inertial reference systems. They're going to go to nav. That means the plane is now starting to figure out where in the world it is. And I'm now just going to follow a logical sweep through the cockpit. So let's just test the air canisters either side of the captain and first officer, and then just work through all of this and switch anything that I need to switch. So I don't need to. I should be in inches of mercury on the barometer, which I am. So that's for the altimeter, and the local pressure here is 299er on the altimeter today. Nothing else that I need to do just here. I'm going to keep this fairly simple, given we're just doing a training flight. The heading that we're going to fly to on the runway is 093. I will quickly jump back to Navigraph to show you where I've got that from. Here is our chart for 09 left, and it's got 093 degrees. That's the runway heading on the compass. So that is that's the heading which I popped into the autopilot here. We're going to keep the altitude quite low. I'm just going to climb up to just 2,000 feet, I think, for this. And auto brakes I will set to rejected takeoff in case we want to abort our takeoff. I will put the parking brake on. I am on VATSIM, so I'm going to tune into Unicom, which is 122.8. That's the open frequency for all pilots on Unicom. And good evening to Johnny, who is on board. Johnny, this is a fairly empty plane tonight, so you can take the first officer's seat. We've even laid on the fluffy insulation for you. I don't know why they have this on a 737. It looks slightly weird. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. So we have tuned into Unicom. That's the shared frequency for everyone on VATSIM. We might hear some other pilots chattering away shortly. I'm just going to set 1200 in the transponder. That's a VFR code. I'm just doing visual circuits, so I'm flying VFR. And here's something quite cool. You can even do tiny things on this add-on, like test the fire extinguishers and test the fire alarms. There's something quite old-fashioned about the 737. So just taking a moment. Can you have a hat? Johnny, you can wear a hat. In fact, you normally like wearing baseball caps. I'm wearing this as a tribute to you. Wear a baseball cap. Join me. Wear a sympathy hat. That's fine by me. There's something quite old-fashioned about the 737. This plane was first built in the 60s. Now it's been massively updated, but there's a lot of it which doesn't really look like it's been updated at all. You've got all these old-fashioned switches and sort of dials, which in even sort of other Boeing aircraft have been completely replaced by glass screens. And the sound of those fire alarms just epitomizes the old-fashioned feel to the 737. Let's just flick those over. If I can get I can't get it over now, can I? Let's just do that one more time. There we go. It's like a school bell. And over here, we can just test all our fire suppression systems are working. We're looking for the 3 green lights there. So a few nice little bits of startup activity there. Okay, so let's now switch to the overhead panel and see what we need to do here. So we have turned on our inertial reference systems. That's how the plane knows where it is. So they're on nav. Scrolling down, we're going to turn on the fuel pumps. We don't need the centre fuel pumps on because the centre tanks are empty because we're not flying very far today. I will, just for good measure, since Johnny's on board, I'm going to turn on the fasten seatbelt sign. I will turn on the window heat. I'm going to just turn on the hydraulic pumps. That's basically how all the various control surfaces move on the plane. I'm also going to turn on the air conditioning. It looks pretty stormy out there, so I think we need the aircon on, and you can hear that power up, which is quite cool. And I'm just going to set our this is our kind of pressurization panel here. So I'm setting the altitude to 2,000 for when we're in the air. That's the panel that controls air pressure, I believe, within the cabin once you're at altitude. If you're really, really high and the air's thin outside and you haven't managed that properly, you could all get hypoxia because the air's just leaking out the plane. And on that cheerful thought, let's carry on setting up the plane. So I'm now going to go down to the flight management computer. So we're going to put everything in here to make this plane fly as we want it to. So The first step is POSINIT, i.e. position initialization, and I'm going to put in our airport code. The code for Miami Opa-locka is Kilo Oscar Papa Foxtrot, or KOPF. And by doing that, I've now told the plane that that's where I am. And our route today is to go from Miami Opa-locka, KOPF, to Miami Opa-locka, KOPF. We're just going to be doing some circuits. I'm going to call myself Southwest 3 Alpha X-ray. Just totally made up. Now we're going to do our departure and arrival. So the departure is going to be from runway 09 left. The arrival is going to be on ILS 09 left. That means instrument landing system. That means we're going to have a guidance system to guide us into the runway, which actually could be quite handy because it's got quite hazy here. It does look quite stormy. So the instrument landing system helps us see where the runway is before we can see the runway with the naked eye. I note Johnny's now also given me a freezing emoji. So maybe I should turn down that aircon. And yes, we can turn it down. So I can. There is. Yeah, here we are. I'm just going to turn. Let's turn that towards warm. There we go. Let's just make that a bit more comfortable in the cabin. Departing on 09 left, doing a quick circuit, and then landing on 09 left. So that's our route, and I'm going to hit activate and execute. Perf init is performance initialization, so I'm going to do a perf init request. This basically asks the FMC to calculate our takeoff performance for us, and we can pop in our zero fuel weight, which is 38,500 kilograms. But otherwise, I'm just going to wait for the FMC to do its thing here. There we go. Load. And it's given me various other bits and pieces, like fuel reserves of 2,000 kilograms, cost index of 10, which is an airline thing, and various other bits in there. So N1 limit is how hard do we want the engines to work? Well, not very hard at all, because we're very light. We've got no one on board. In terms of the actual weight, obviously we have our lovely viewers today on board, but the plane is very light. We are not carrying much fuel. We haven't got any luggage or people, so we're going to do a derated takeoff -2 and a climb -2. This is about preserving engine life. I can make the engines work less hard. They'll only accelerate to about 85% of their full power, and then takeoff will have flaps set to 5. We will set our trim to 4.7 in just a moment, and that gives us a V1 speed. That's a we take off no matter what speed of 106 knots. We're going to rotate. That means literally turn on the runway and take off at 109 knots, and we will leave the ground at 117 knots. It's all going to happen very quickly because the plane's so light. So this trim point I'm just going to sort out now. That is down here. Again, this is where the 737 is almost archaic. So I'm looking at this green measurement here. The arrow needs to be pointing roughly to 4.7, so about 4. Yeah, probably about there, 4.7 there. And this trim wheel, I'm not sure that any other aircraft have a trim wheel quite like this anymore. This is something from, times gone by. Boeing 707s back in the 50s would have had a trim wheel, and you actually trim the plane, which is how you keep it sort of straight and level, using this wheel. Now, generally speaking, it's all done automatically on the buttons over here. But in the 737, they still have a trim wheel, and throughout the flight, we will hear that turning round in the corner there. Okay, so I'm just doing a bit of a sweep through again here. Let's get the auto throttle armed. We'll turn on the flight directors now. And I'm going to put in our takeoff speed of 117 knots into the MCP. And I'm going to put the heading selector mode on. So what that is going to do is tell the flight directors, which are these pink crosshairs here, it will tell the flight directors where they need to be to tell me how to fly the plane in order to get to that altitude and fly on that heading. That will become a bit clearer shortly if it's not clear already. So MCP, the MCP is basically where you control the autopilot. That is now nicely set up. One more thing actually I'm just going to do, of course, because this is the 737. I will set my course heading to 093 for the runway. And we are also going to tune into Opalocker's localizer. So let's just jump across to this chart again. We can see this thing here which says ILS, instrument landing system, is 093 degrees, and the frequency is 110.5, and that will give us our instrument landing system display in the cockpit. Helpfully, it's already set to 110.5 in the active window of our nav displays here, so that means we are already tuned to the ILS, which is very good. So, starting to look almost ready to go, I think. Here's what we're going to do now. We will disconnect everything. So, ground services will release the ground power. We're going to release the stairs. We're going to close the doors. There it goes, it's closing. And we will remove the wheel chocks. And if we just take a look outside again, here is the 737. You can hear the APU there. That hiss at the back is the auxiliary power unit powering up the plane. There go the stairs. And we are now running under our own power and free of vehicles, doors shut, and everything's looking good. So what I'm now going to do is warn everybody that I'm going to be turning on the engine shortly by turning on the red flashing beacon. So you can now see I've just turned on that red flashing light there. That tells people we're about to move. I'm going to turn off the air conditioning just for a moment because we have to in order to start the engines. And I'm going to start up engine number 2. So I'm now looking over here for this top number to hit 15, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, at which point we're just going to put some fuel into the engine and it will start up for us. One thing I really like about the 737 over the Airbus, so I'm a big fan of flying the Airbus A320, but one thing I really like about the 737 is the engines start really quickly. Sometimes in the Airbus they can take ages, like a minute or two. This is very straightforward. Chase Sawyer is watching. Good evening, Chase. Thank you for tuning in. We are going to be doing some circuits and go-around practice because it's so long since I've flown a 737, I'm as good as new to this aircraft, so I'm just relearning how to fly the 737. And we are in Miami doing some circuits this evening. Right, engine number 1 is now started, so I'm going to turn on engine number 2. Same process. Look for 15 on the engine display down here. And once it hits 15, I'm going to inject some fuel. Very pleasing sound of the engines starting to spool up in my my headset here. So what we're now going to do is get ready for takeoff. So I'm going to set the flaps to 5. And test the various control surfaces. So I'll start with the rudder, which I'm doing with my feet. So rudder left and rudder right. And then I'll do the spoilers. Fine. And just check all of this is moving as expected. So that's good. So flaps are set. Flight control surfaces are checked. Let's check. This is also quite an old-fashioned system on the 737, may I say. The way of checking for emergency problems. You press this on each side, and whatever stays lit, you then need to check for a problem overhead. So that says flight controls. And I then look up here and I can see that the yaw damper is off. If I turn the yaw damper on, bingo, that's gone. So I then have to press it again and it's clear. Over here, it says air conditioning. And if I look up here, I can see I haven't yet turned off my air conditioning. So I'm just going to do that. I can now turn off the APU. I'm going to switch over to engine power now. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we're all set, all good to go. So let's turn on the taxi lights. And I am on VATSIM. I'll just quickly show you this screen just before we taxi out. I'm here at Miami Opa-locka. You can see some recent circuits I did at Opa-locka, just practicing landing and taking off and all that kind of stuff. This is what we're going to be doing again now. So if you like watching landings, you don't have long to wait. We'll be doing an approach in just a few moments' time. So that's where we are. There's no one else in the area coming into Opa-locka, so you might hear some other radio comms, but I'm largely just going to fly silently today without having to speak to air traffic controllers. Okay, so release the parking brakes, just a little bit of breakaway power. Check left and right. Oh, we've got a van. Should we let the van come through? We should probably let the van come through. Go on. There we are. Right, so off we go. And as I said at the beginning of the live stream, we're just going to taxi along November to the holding point for 09 left. And once again, with taxiways, you are on the taxiway, which is black, and you can choose to turn on to the taxiway, which is in yellow. So we're on Echo, and November is to our left and right. So if I turn left here, I will be on November, heading towards the runway where we're going to be taking off. It is now raining at Miami Opa-locka, which is perfect actually, because it's this kind of weather where you might have to do a missed approach. So makes it all the more worthwhile doing. Not far to taxi. If you are enjoying this video, please do hit the subscribe button and do click like. These things really do matter and count. I recently, in fact yesterday, I hit 1,000 followers on Instagram. This was just, I should just say, my YouTube channel, my Instagram was just my COVID lockdown project to try and keep myself interested in something. But I've kept it up, and I'm trying to make it do something of interest, trying to keep it interesting for anyone watching. So thank you in advance for hitting subscribe and clicking on like if you haven't done so already. There we go, just went up to 3 likes, so that was worth saying, wasn't it? Sadly, only on passing 1,000 followers on Instagram did I find out that that is not enough to monetize, so I'm still stuck with the day job. But I guess that's how it is. To be honest, I enjoy my job, and it's quite fun doing flight simming because at least I'm at home. I get to do it with my children at weekends as well, because my 2 boys love flying, and I don't get jet lagged. So I know this is fake. I know it's fake flying. I know it's not real. But there are real advantages to being a simmer over being a real pilot. So here we are. We're at the end of the runway now. Let's turn on the landing lights. And we will now turn on the strobes and the wing lights. And we can line up. Here we are on 9L, 9 left, so runway is verified. Okay, just checking the windsock over there. You can see the wind is blowing in this direction slightly to our right hand side, so this is definitely the right runway for us to be taking off from. And now I'm just going to give the engines a little bit of power, take it up to 40% M1, which I'm looking at down here on this screen. I can see I've just put it up to about 40%. That's all nice and stable, so I'm going to hit the takeoff go around button. And away we go. There you go, yeah, just short of 90% of full engine power because of how light the plane is. That is a really fast takeoff roll. Gear up. It would take longer if we had more weight on board. So there's a lot to do here, so I'm just going to switch on the autopilot. So we are holding a heading of 093 degrees. I'm going to increase the speed a bit. I'll take us up to 220 knots. Like that. And I'll bring in the flaps a bit. This is really murky. So flaps can now come in fully. We'll put the landing gear lever to the off position. We have gone through our target altitude of 2,000 feet, but that's no big problem given we don't have any air traffic control on. And what we're now going to do is turn directly to the north, which is 360 or 0 degrees, like that. You can hear the trim wheel spinning there. It's so old-fashioned, it's almost charming. So you can see the freeway down there, plenty of traffic heading into and out of Miami downtown. Actually, I think I might just put some lights on here because it's a little bit dim. And let's put some on down here as well. There we go. Okay, so we'll now turn to the left and do our downwind leg, as they call it. So, as we all know, there are 90 degrees in a right angle. So, to fly straight north is 0 degrees, or 360. To fly west is then 90 degrees down from that, so 270 degrees. To fly south is 180 degrees, and to fly east is 90 degrees. So I'm just constantly dealing with factors of 90 degrees doing these circuits. And it's quite handy because the runway heading at Miami Opa-locka is directly east. Well, very nearly 090 degrees. It's 093, but as good as. So the airport's just over there somewhere, but we just can't see it because of the dreadful weather. Okay, so already we are going to start slowing down. Just going to slow it down to 180 knots. Now, key thing with the go around is to prepare the plane so you can get it to tell you how to fly in order to keep control of it. So the actual missed approach procedure for 09 left at Opa-locka is to, it says here, climb to 2,000 feet on heading 093 degrees and then outbound on the 069 radial from the Dolphin VOR, which is down here, to Janus. So we would go straight and then pick up this line and head out to some a waypoint called Janus. I'm not going to go all the way to Janus, it's out over the Atlantic. But what we'll just do is climb to 2,000 feet and then do another circuit. Like that. But you climb to 2,000 feet. Now that's important because that is what I'm going to be putting into our MCP up here. That will then drive the flight controllers, the flight directors on the primary flight display, so that the pink crosshairs here You always want to be flying the plane so that you're dead on those pink crosshairs, right in the middle of the cross. And if I program all of the details into the MCP up here, it will then give me a reference point on those crosshairs that I can then fly to keep the go around under control. So what we're now going to do is start our approach, and I'm just going to do this quickly down here on the FMC. What we are doing in a nutshell is we're just going to shortcut. We're just up here with the pink arrow here. We're just going to have a shortcut down to SASBO, where we're going to pick up the instrument landing system. Sorry, there we go, meant to show you this. With this pink arrow up here, we're just going to shortcut down to SASBO, where we pick up the instrument landing guidance system, which will then take us down to the runway. So we're doing a shortcut to SASBO. At SASBO we need to be at 1,600 feet, so I'm going to just descend to that now. I'm just going to take it nice and slow. So if I look in this window here, you can see SASBO is 3.2 nautical miles away. It's just in front of us there on that pink line. So we're just headed towards that, not very far away. And I'm going to start putting the flaps out. To slow us up. And I'm going to turn on approach hold on the autopilot. Slow us right down now. This will mean it's going to guide us in on the ILS. I will take control once we're established, but I need to set the plane up ready to do our go around. If I flip over here, you will see the ILS in action. This pink diamond needs to be on that center line. That's the glide slope, so that's the rate of descent that we need to meet. And this pink line here is going to start moving any second now into the center. Once it's in the center of this line, we're on the runway center line. We then have to hold that line all the way in. Okay, here it comes. There comes the pink line. So this runway center line is called the localizer, and this is called the glide slope. So once you're squarely on both, you're fully established and you're heading towards the runway exactly as you need to be. I'm just going to turn it back for the moment to the map mode. What I'm now going to do whilst it's just flying us in is select 2,000 feet on the altitude setting on the MCP. That's where we want to be climbing up to. And I'm going to go back on the heading to 093. And then I'm going to take manual control. So I'm going to turn off the auto throttle. And I'm going to turn off the autopilot. Makes that delightful noise. I now have control. I'm going to put the gear down and start putting the flaps out a bit more. And I'm now following the flight directors, so I'm on the pink crosshairs on this left-hand screen, following those all the way down. But we are going to be doing a go-around very shortly just to practice that. So we won't be landing on this occasion. So I've got an approach speed here of 117 knots, which I omitted to put into the flight management system just a short while ago, but it's all okay. I've now got it in there. A little bit of power just to make sure we level off nicely on the glide slope. Actually, this approach isn't fantastic, so this is a good one to do a go around on. I'm going to go around now. I'm going to re-engage the auto throttle. I'm going to hit the toga button and then follow the flight directors. Gear up. And I can just gradually bring in the flaps. And I'm just focused entirely on the pink crosshairs just to keep the plane on the flight directors so that this stays nicely under control. And at this point, it should be okay to put the autopilot back on, select the heading, and it should now level off almost at 2,000 feet. Again, it's gone slightly over. 2,000 feet is very low, actually, for a go-around altitude. But that was nicely controlled. We weren't kind of going up like a rocket or, you know, careering off to the side or anything like that. So we have gone up to 3,000 feet. But yeah, 2,000 feet is very, very low. Particularly with a plane this light, we're going to get to that altitude in no time whatsoever. Main thing is, though, that I would have the plane under control and would be able to do whatever air traffic control might be asking me to do. So flaps are all the way in. I'll move the gear lever to the off position. And we're now going to reconfigure that approach. So our speed will be 116, 117 knots. Which I'll just show you what I'm doing down here. In the flight management computer, this is the approach reference speed. So 30 degrees of flap, 116 knots, that'll be fine for us. So we don't want to drop below 116 knots. So I've put that in. And then I'm going to reprogram the approach. So go back into the departures and arrivals page on the FMC, select ILS 09 left. And that's now set up for us. And once again, we'll turn now to the west, so back to 270 degrees. Trim wheel again getting really rather overexcited down there. Small airport. I'm not sure which airport that is. That might be Miami Executive. Let's have a quick look, shall we? Where are we now? Here we go. Okay, that is Hollywood North Perry Airport, just up here. Again, with a pink arrow. So Miami Opa-locka is just there, and Miami International is just there. So they're all in a line dotted down the coast. And there's Fort Lauderdale up here as well somewhere. There is no shortage of airports in this city. Okay, so back in the sim. The airport is just over there. You can see a flashing green light on top of the control tower just there. So we're all ready to have another shot. We'll do another circuit, do another go around, and then next time around we will land.
On the traffic, this American 674 will follow behind Delta 416. Follow initial approach, I'll let somebody right line.
Again, just in case you missed it at the beginning of this live stream, this is what we're trying to avoid. So this was one I recorded earlier, where you haven't prepared the FMC, haven't prepared the autopilot, and it all just goes a bit wild. You get to a point where you decide, right, I need to go around, or, you know, particularly if you're on VATSIM, an air traffic controller says, go around, and suddenly you just force the throttles forward, the nose shoots up in the air. It's starting to put the plane into a stall, or risking a stall. And you're frantically trying to regain control. Why do I practice go-arounds in the way that I'm doing today? Well, the answer to that question is that I had a VATSIM go-around once where I think I was landing at New York JFK in a 747, and I had to do a go-around at the last minute. I hadn't prepared properly for it, and it was such a mess. I'd flown all the way from London, and it had been a great flight, and there I was on VATSIM, and I felt like I'd really screwed that up. So I made a vow, never again. I need to know need to know how to do go-arounds properly, even though I'm flying this single-handed, which does make it so much harder. Okay, so let's go in again. I'm just going to reprogram our approach sequence here into runway 09 left. Starting to slow up nicely. Again, as per...
American 670 short funnel out of runway 8 right. We're right behind the Delta 416. You see, looks like they're on runway 12.
Okay. He's not flying into Miami Open Locker, he's flying into Miami International, so that's fine. Yeah, so as per the approach chart, we need to be at 1,600 feet by SASBO, and if you look just there, it says SASBO 1,600, just as a reminder. So I'm now descending down to 1,600. We will pick up the instrument landing system at SASBO, and we'll be nicely aligned with the glide slope if we're at 1,600 feet. Just a few miles now to go. I may as well just use the time to already get things prepared for a go-around. So I will set the heading to the heading we want to pick up in the event we go around. That's 093 degrees. I'm not going to set the altitude yet. I will set that once we are established on the glide slope. Otherwise, for landing, we've got the speed brakes armed. We've got our auto brakes still set to rejected takeoff. Glad I checked that. Let's put that to auto brakes 1. Don't know if you can see, but you can see some traffic in the distance there, just going into Miami. It's just there. I can see his lights flashing. Again, the joys of flying on VATSIM. It feels much more immersive and real when you're flying with other people around. Flip the navigation display again to our approach mode. So this pink diamond, when that hits that white line, we're going to be on the glide slope, so we're on the right descent profile. And once this pink line comes across, here it comes, this is the runway center line. It's called the localizer, and that's going to guide us in. So we keep that pink line in the center, we keep that pink diamond in the center, and we're going to be perfectly aligned for our approach.
American 674, we're taxiing over to Delta 37 via November, Miami.
So, autopilot can go off, auto throttle can come off. I'll start slowing the plane down now. Don't be alarmed, that is just the alarm to say you've turned off the autopilot. Do you mean to do that? The answer is yes. We're just going to put out the gear. You can see the runway. And once again, I'm just following the flight directors down, so keeping the plane on the pink crosshairs, just on this left-hand primary flight display here. And let's really slow the plane up now. And again, not happy with the approach. This is too fast. So I'm going to say, put the auto throttle back on again, hit the toga button, and follow the flight directors back up. Gear up. A lot of forward pressure on the control stick here. Bring in the flaps. That's to warn me that my flaps are out quite a lot. They're coming in now. Yeah, a lot of forward pressure on the control stick to keep the plane from rocketing up into the sky. And again, I've regained control quite quickly. Good, that noise has stopped. I've regained control quite quickly of following the go around. Not too wild, not too fast and furious. Again, the plane is going to be quite light whenever you're coming to land, because you're going to be at the end of your flight, so it's going to be quite light. And you know, you suddenly force the throttle all the way forward to go back up again. You know, it can go up really, really steeply, and you just lose control. Then you know, it's so easy to stall the plane. So for me, I don't know if this is if my procedure for doing go rounds is how they do it in the real world, but this is certainly how I do it. It's all about preparing and inputting what you want over here in the autopilot. That will then tell you how to fly once you decide to do the go around. The flight directives will then be guiding you correctly. So that's how you do a go around, or that's how I do a go around, and hopefully avoid anything too wild and uncontrolled. But this time we're actually going to have a shot at landing. So once again, we are going to just take a quick look at the flight management computer down here. This time we'll do a flaps 40 approach, take it nice and slow, so that gives us a landing speed of 113 knots. That's really, really slow for a jet like you know, an airliner sized jet. That is very, very slow. And we are going to configure our approach one last time. So approach into ILS 09 left. We'll execute that, and that has put it back into our navigation display. This screen here in the middle is essentially our map. Hello to Ian and Suri. Thank you for joining. Good to have you on board. Hope you enjoyed that go around a few moments ago. I think, Ian, you may have caught my go around last week in the Airbus A320, and that is why I decided to do a little bit of a live stream tutorial on how I do go arounds, because from a piloting perspective they're one of the hardest things I do, that and crosswind landings, particularly as I'm on my own. This plane is designed to be flown by two people, but the first officer is conspicuous by his absence here. Just speed up the plane a little bit. Again, the airport's just over there. We will go a bit beyond the airport and then turn in and make our final approach. So one last look now at the navgraph chart. So this is again the chart for the approach into ILS runway 09 left. We're going to pick up the approach this time at O'Kane and then follow this instrument landing system beam all the way in. That's the localizer and glide slope we were just talking about. You can see in the pink arrow we're just at the top here doing what's called a downwind leg. That's the downwind leg, that's the base leg, that's final approach, upwind and then crosswind if you're doing circuits. So we're currently on a downwind leg. Our decision height is 258 feet, so that means we can't go below 258 feet without seeing the runway. That should be fine. However, for completeness, we probably also ought to put that into our PFD, so 258 feet. I've just put that down here where it says Barrow 258. I've just dialed that in, and that should now cause the plane to call out minimums when I reach my minimum descent altitude. So we've had our landing lights on all the way through because we're below 10,000 feet. We've had our taxi lights on all the way through for the same reason. And wing lights, everything else is all on. I'm just checking now in advance of landing. Seatbelt signs are on. Can give those a quick ping. So depending on how realistic you like your flight simming, by all means do fasten your seatbelt firmly at this stage. And yeah, I think we're all pretty much set. We're good to go. Just taking this one a little bit further out to make sure I've got a little bit more time to get established on the localizer and glide slope. So I'm going to start slowing up a bit now. Take it down to 180 knots. When do you put out the flaps? Well, to start with, what are the flaps? The flaps are the things... oh, whoa, it's an interesting angle. Okay, the flaps are just behind the wing here. So you can see them as a passenger. You'll see me put them out now. Or start to put them out. You can see them moving now. They slow the plane down without causing... You can slow the plane down without losing lift. And you always have them out for landing, because that means you can basically fly as slow as possible as you make your approach. So let's now turn back in towards the runway. I'm just going to configure that one last time on the FMC. You can now see what I was just doing there on the flight management computer is essentially drawing this pink line towards O'Kane, and then I can get the plane to fly along that pink line. It's a little bit brighter than when we started this. I am flying on real world weather. The weather on Flight Sim 2020 is, like with pretty much everything else about Flight Sim 2020, absolutely incredible. When I first started flight simming as a child, it was green for ground, blue for sky, and a few basic dials in the most basic graphics imaginable. I would never have dreamt of anything quite as realistic as this. And it's great to be flying a plane which is as realistic as this 737 model. Truly as real as it gets. So we're just a couple of miles away now from intercepting the instrument landing system for our approach. I'm just going to hit the approach hold button on the autopilot. That means it's going to capture it for me. Again, I could be accused of being lazy, but there's a lot to do here when you're flying these aircraft, and safety first. Let's just reduce a bit of pilot workload and make sure I get this right. So what I'm now looking for is, once again on our approach screen, here comes the pink line. When that is in the center of that line, we're going to be perfectly aligned with the runway center line. And we will then look for the glide slope as well. So at the moment that pink diamond there is above us. That means the glide slope is up there somewhere. It's going to start dropping down. When it hits that center line, we're then perfectly on the glide slope. And I've got a secondary point of reference for that here. So there's the glide slope, there's the localizer. And if I follow these flight directors all the way in, I will stay on the localizer and glide slope. And for good measure, I can now see the runway in the distance there. So let's start really slowing ourselves down now. Here comes the glide slope. You can see that pink diamond is now active. Let's get the gear down. I'm just going to, just in case I totally screw this approach up, I'm going to prepare for a missed approach and set the heading selected to 093 in case we need to go around again. Going to really slow up now. Our approach speed is just 113 knots. We'll go down to about 140 for now. And speed brakes are armed. Speed brakes are armed. Auto brakes are also set. They're just set to 1, so they'll help slow the plane down once we hit the ground. Now I'm going to turn off the auto throttle, turn off the autopilot, and I have control. That's the outer marker beacon for Miami Opa-locka. It's just another navigational aid. So what I'm just doing here is circling what I'm looking at between speed. I don't want to slow down too much because otherwise I'll just drop out of the sky and stall. I'm checking my flight directives, just make sure I'm on the crosshairs, and I can also just look at this as well, just make doubly sure that I appear to be on the localizer and on the glide slope. And then, last but not least, always pays to look out the window. Just make sure that what your instruments are saying checks out. Okay, 10 degrees of flap now. You can tell when you need to get flaps out if all else fails, because you'll start to feel like you're very nose up. The plane is struggling to stay in the sky. When you put the flaps out, it's able to drop the nose down a bit more. In addition, on the primary flight display on the left-hand side here, you can see an indicator of when you should be putting flaps out in that green text, which is quite handy. Whoa! I should do more flying and less talking, I think. Let's just get back to where we were. A bit more flaps. We can ignore that. That's traffic going into Miami. But that alert sound there is called TCAS, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. Real aircraft have it, and it just monitors aircraft moving around you. The only time you can do something contrary to an air traffic controller's instruction is if TCAS tells you to climb or descend. I believe that is true. I read that somewhere. So here we are, still pretty much on the ILS. I can see two white and 2 red lights just to the left of the runway. They are PAPI approach indicator lights. If I've got 2 white, 2 red, that means I'm coming in about right. I'm actually slightly below VREF here at 110 knots, so slightly slower than expected. But the plane is handling this fine. If I take it up to 113 knots, it's going to start ballooning and overshooting where we want to land. And we want to land where those 2 big white blocks are to the left of the centre line, just in front of us here.
40, 30, 20, 10.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. So reverse thrust. John, you've joined us just in time for the landing. And can I say that was one of my better landings? I'm quite proud of that because I've only just got the 737 back into service this weekend. So I was actually slightly nervous before doing this live stream, as I thought there's every chance I could massively screw this up. Okay, so let's pull this fantastic aircraft off the runway and we can taxi in and shut it down. If you've enjoyed this live stream, do hit subscribe, do hit like, and if you missed it and you fancy watching it back, don't forget it will be added to the list of videos on the channel, so you can take another look. Now that we're off the runway, I can turn off the landing lights. These are really fiddly. There we go. And go on, go on, go on. So fiddly. I'm looking there, no, there, there. Good. And let's turn on the APU. We'll need that in just a second. We'll bring in the flaps, bring in the spoilers, turn off the auto brakes, turn off the flight directors. And I'm just going to do a U-turn here. And I'll park up along the Cessna, which is just behind me. Just over there, look. I mean, a 737-700 is small by airliner standards. Still looks pretty massive alongside a Cessna. This is a Cessna over here. It's alright, I talk about these things like everyone knows what I'm talking about, but I appreciate not everyone is a massive flying geek like I am. So the APU is now on, so let's just switch over to APU power, which means we can shut down the engines in a moment or two without the whole plane going into blackout. Size matters. This is basically a massive status symbol thing of saying mine's bigger. My plane is bigger than that plane. There you go. How pathetic. But all part of the fun. Right, so let's turn off the engines. We'll set the parking brakes. Engines off. And we can turn off the strobes. I should have done that earlier. And we can turn off the red flashing beacon. We can also turn off the taxi lights. What we can do is call out our stairs. If I set the wheel chocks, I'll request ground power, and as soon as the engines have calmed down a bit, I will request the stairs. So there's our ground power unit just down here. You can see we're plugged into him. And that means I can now switch over to ground power. And I can turn off the APU and stop chucking carbon dioxide into the environment. Am I expecting you to walk to the terminal? Well, I think actually there is a passenger bus available. There is literally no end to the realism here. So let's call out the stairs to start with. I don't know if you want to get out front or back. So let's call out stairs to both front and back. And I'm sure somewhere down here. There we go, passenger bus. So no, I'm not expecting anyone to have to walk to the terminal. Here it comes. So let's just jump back in quickly. And, oh, no, I have to do that down here. I'll open the doors. There we go, opening. And you can now step out. And we can even do that. Let's take it nice and slow and go inside the plane. I'm thinking, Ian and Sarah, you'd be likely to be sat up at the front of the plane. I think that's where you'd be. So let's assume you're sat up here in business class. And then you can leave the plane. How civilized. Down we go. Onto a brand new passenger bus. Right, okay. That's not great. But the rest of it is, this has been a really fun session, flying a few go-arounds here at Miami Opaloka. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I will, of course, be doing another live stream very, very soon. If there's anything you'd like to see, I I'd be very happy to take requests. I can do flights in the brand new 737 like I've just done. I can fly the Airbus A320. I've also got a Boeing 747, the classic queen of the skies, a Boeing 777 and a Dreamliner, as well as some various GA aircraft here on Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. So if there's anything you'd like to see, let me know and I'll be happy to do a live stream on that. Thank you very much for watching. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I will speak to you very soon. Have a great evening.